3603 Indiana, where the prophet's house stood at one time. This was the basement was here where he produced the Moorish oil tin compound, and there were two floors that the first floor he stayed on, the second floor was the foreman bays. This is where Millie Ill came and wrote insurance for those Moors here. Later on, the building was dilapidated, and it fell in the hands of Walter Weems. Walter Weems didn't like church at all. He didn't like preachers or nobody. And he happened to be working for the Chicago Housing Authority when I met him years later in the early 80s. He was married to Valoria Weems. The house went into, the property went into Valoria Weems, who happened to be a real estate agent. For some reason, Walter Weems would have nothing to do with Christian ministers. He didn't like him at all. We don't know why. But Valoria Weems worked for DuSable Real Estate. That's on, to this day, it's on 83rd near Kings Drive. Walter Weems passed, and he told his wife when he passed to make sure that this property fell into our hands. Islam? So Valoria Weems called me, we kept in contact, and she said, I'm ready to get rid of the lot. This is the first experience we had where we tried to pull the Moors together to get the lot. Well, you know what happened. It didn't work. So the church right here called Pentecostal Church bought the lot, in which one of the things we need to do was to raise the finance and buy it back from him. That church down right here on the street on the corner was one of the, in the prophet's day, was one of the Christian ministers who opposed the prophet. Right across the street from the church is World Messenger Printing. Before it was Royal Messenger Printing, it was a printing company owned by one of the Moors that was in the basement. That's been torn down. Right across the street from there is a tavern that they call the Bucket of Blood in the basement. It just so happened that my mother's half-sister wound up owning that tavern years later. Islam? But this, I'm telling you as much as I know about this lot here and its whole community. Now, from here, 3603 Indiana is where the prophet would get in his Cadillac and be chauffeured down here to 3140. So I want you to keep in mind, because that's our next stop, 3140 Indiana, how long it take you to get there from here. And this is how the prophet would ride from here to 3140, and he got there one day and all his furniture was on the street, right from here. Islam?
Islam.
Was in the basement during the first convention. The picture you see where the Moors are sitting on the steps, these are not these steps, this is where they were. Right here, on your right side, is the office of Oscar de Priest. The picture you see we're talking about, where the prophet sitting there, with Sister Pearl Ali, is this office right here. This was the prophet's office. This is the window here. The second office down here was the Bruce's place. This hallway, if you want to come up, look through the window. They done took the hallway down. But there was a hallway from here that led you to the central place. But when the prophet was in town, the Moors would line up on each side of the hallway, ready to shake his hand before they moved into the main area there, which used to be the main when they held the meetings at. That has never changed until now. It just recently changed. Illinois Institute of Technology bought up everything you see here. The last piece that they bought was here. They were so eager to get this piece that they bought the alley in back of here and made sure that they owned the alley as well, and this piece here too. The only piece that was left to own was this building right here. There are 3 floors in here. Each floor holds 10 rooms. Each room has their own fireplace, their own bathroom, because this is a playhouse for the rich Jews. So every time the first convention was held here, every time they wanted to eat, they would go down here where the food was prepared in the Moorish luncheon, which still, when I was around in, say, 1983, it still had all the food equipment, stoves, everything. And this is where they would go down and get their sandwich. And you see the Moors looking through the window, these are the same windows. This is a historical landmark site. And if you read this here, Unity Hall, Louis B. Dixon was the architect in 1887. That's how long this building been around. And then I'll read it for you. It says, oh, by the way, before I read it, the Reverend at that time, Reverend Watson, they took his name down. IIT was on him so much, and they sent so many building inspectors in here to note building violations so they can scan the property. I was working at that time as the health inspector, and I used my connections in the city to help them get this landmark status. That is a fact.
The question just to GS, Supreme, pardon me, is there any reason that it's going to remain that way forever, or?
Landmark?
Yes.
Forever. Forever. Originally built as the Lakeside Club. Remember I was telling you that this was Car Row. If you go further down past 22nd Street, on Indiana and Michigan, that's where you got your new car from. So they had enough money to build this, and further down here, which later became the Defender newspaper, was their playhouse as well. Here, I'm going to read this and explain to you in depth. Originally built as the Lakeside Club, a Jewish social organization. This structure was renamed the People's Movement Club, a political organization of African Americans, headed by Oscar Stanton DePriest, who was not that great of a man. He was all right, but he hobnobbed with the prophet to get his votes. Because remember, we had between 2,000 and 5,000 members. Oscar DePriest and this political organization were all Republicans. Even Louis B. Anderson, who was the second alderman in the Republican Party, which was our party we preferred, the Republican Party. African American elected, and when Oscar DePriest, who was, I don't know if he was a Bear Hill, but he was a member, I can't stand on it. When he got to D.C., he didn't do what he told the prophet he would do. If he stood up and screamed about something, the only thing he screamed about was the fact that the White House ladies would not let his wife in the tea club where they would be sipping tea. You read about that too, right? That's the only thing he screamed about. Remember now, Oscar DePriest came to Chicago as a painter. He would decorate people's houses. Then he got in bed with Oscar Brown Sr., Oscar Brown Jr., the entertainer. Oscar Brown Sr., one of the very few Asiatics that was into real estate. Oscar Brown Sr. remained to be a Christian, but he was not a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam. So from being decorating houses, Oscar DePriest went to policy numbers, which is like lottery, but it was illegal back then. And William Dawson was the lawyer for most of the big people in policy under Jones, the Jones brothers, Jones Bays, that he defended in going to court, their major cases. To the city council, it says the first northern black elected to the U.S., I'm reading it, U.S. House of Representatives. This rare surviving example of a 19th century clubhouse building is one of the 9 structures in the so-called black metropolis, Bronzeville Historic District. This was an area here that promoted segregated housing. We as a people couldn't move anywhere else but here on the south side. The building we passed down the street with the scaffolds on there is Pilgrim Baptist Church. But before it was Pilgrim Baptist Church, it was a synagogue, and you can still see the Star of David up in the top. It recently burnt down, but the Jews would go to the synagogue there and back and forth to here, which was their playhouse. Now, we left the Prophets, 3603 Indiana. He had it arranged where he would come from 3603 right down here to worship. Islam? No. When the Prophet came here, when this was the People's Movement Club, because we was expanding this way west, we had no other place to go. So many of our people expanded this way west. And so the Jews felt compelled to leave then. And when they left, this is what they left. When they left, we kind of moved into this area. This was a so-called upgrade area from where we used to live. Indiana was a two-way street then. It wasn't a one-way street. All right? And the police station is right around the corner from here. It was one of the police stations when you turn down this way left that they arrested the Prophet and put him there and moved him from different police stations. Islam? I'm trying to remember to tell you everything. Those Moors who had been a part of the People's Movement didn't know exactly what to do. They didn't realize that they were citizens and their nationality was Moorish American. So amongst those 3,000 to 5,000 members who were attending right here, the Prophet Noble Jurali, teaching them his doctrine, began to galvanize their political power and move as one body, and was able to move Oscar the Priest into that office. But this area is the last of the pieces that we have left about our history. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Brother Sloan Eel, one of my teachers, who was the president of the Chicago Moorish Industrial Club. His wife's name was Effie. I met him in the hospital like I met Henry Bay. His wife was dying of encephalitis. Where's Ben Bay? Encephalitis, inflammation of what? The brain, yeah. Anyway, he told me out of his mouth how the Prophet would travel all the time. And when they heard that he was coming back to Chicago, this side of the steps, that side of the steps, all the way down to the main hall was filled with Moors. He said that when they knew, they would take a bath and put on their best clothes and be clean, because they believed that as the Prophet walked through here, that he would shake their hand if they wasn't clean. So this came out of his mouth. I learned a lot about our Prophet that's not in the books from people like him. In fact, Sloan Hill, I think, was one of the main first people who joined the Moorish Science Temple of America when the Prophet came to Chicago, Islam. But originally, the Moors met down in the basement, which is just as big as this building. And the church, the People's Movement, had the church meeting up here. This whole building was managed by who? Claude Green Bay. In fact, the murder that took place was on the second floor of this building, where they found Claude Green Bay upstairs, shot in the heart and his throat cut. And Ira Johnson Bay, was the one who they accused of doing it. But Julius Roosevelt, having so much political power and strong power and multi-billionaire, said that the Prophet did it. The Prophet wasn't even in Chicago. So they had him arrested. He was so angry that his main guy did not carry through the overtaking of this organization. In fact, the coup of the Moor, the attempted coup of the Moorish Science Temple of America started with Claude Green Bay. Many people think that the confusion and the disorganization started later on. No, it started here with the Prophet, because Claude Green Bay began to solicit people to his side. And one of the main people he began to solicit to his side was Sister funeral home where the Prophet was had his services is down the street from here, and it was owned by a European. We're gonna go there, but when that funeral home closed, he moved to this funeral home. This is the same funeral home we had P. David Seals' funeral in, and they have in the back a big brass bowl where they burn frank and myrrh incense during funeral services. So this was called Unity Funeral Home, in regards to Unity Hall down the street. Islam still bears that name. A lot of Moorish historians don't know about this, but this was it. So since the Prophet's funeral home when he had the services at, and moved here and they called it Unity, I thought it would be good to preserve P. Davis Hill's body on ice here and have his service here. Okay, so yes, history. Any questions? Now we're getting ready to move to 4136, which is now somebody's house. But when the Prophet had his funeral service, it was a funeral home. Part of Moorish history that some of us never knew about. Now I don't have permission to go inside of this man's home, so we're going to stand outside and just talk about it. Those of you who've seen the photos of Payne Hill with the gloves on, you've seen that on the side where the driveway is still there, where they were taking the Prophet's body out. This was once the funeral home. This is the funeral home where the Prophet had his services at. This was the driveway that the hearse came down. It's still intact. Some people still live here. But this, back in the Prophet's day, was one of the best funeral homes you can have your services at. All right? Now the next street over, for those of you who don't know, is Indiana. But these were two-way streets. But now it's a one-way street. This was owned by a European Jew, I think. All the way in the back, the garage where the hearses were stored. And this was all service. This was the parlor that you could go into. Back during the Prophet's day, this building was considered to be a huge building. Even if you look at Jesse Bingham's house, if you